Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajmain. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining me. So this is the final installment in our installment of the weekly lecture series. In our series under the theme, in our series from the weekly lecture series under the theme Reflections as we prepare for Ramadan. And today what I wanted to discuss was a few issues that I consider to fall into the category of helping us to get in the right mindset for Ramadan, helping us to get in the right mindset for Ramadan. And what I mean by that is to get excited, to get eager, and to prepare ourselves to get out of the gate of the month at a good, sustainable pace. And so what we want to do is I stress and emphasize the word sustainable, good, sustainable pace, because in many cases what happens is that we leave the gate either with very little enthusiasm, with very little vigor, with very little excitement, and that doesn't end well for us. We lose a lot of time just trying to get our sea legs, if you will. And what ends up happening is we miss out on a lot of opportunities and a lot of reward from Allah, because we just didn't get out of the gate at the right pace, with the right amount of vigor and the right amount of zeal. On the other hand, you have some people who they bolt out of the gate, and they're doing a lot. They're very motivated in the beginning, but they run out of the gate at a pace that they can't sustain. And so what ultimately happens with them is they run out of gas. And so by the end of the month, when they really should be ramping things up, they end up not able to to sustain that energy, and just basically kind of dragging themselves across the finish line of the month. And so again, we want to avoid both of those states. We want to start out of the gate at a good, sustainable pace, maintain that pace, and keep our wind, so that when we get to the end of the month, we can really ramp up our effort and our enthusiasm toward the end of the month, where it really counts. So that said, there's going to be a few topics we're going to cover tonight, inshallah ta'ala, and I'll list those ala ujala as bullets, and then we'll go through them one by one in more detail. So the first thing I wanted to look at was fada'il as-siyam, the virtues, the merits, the spiritual and practical advantages of fasting. Because anytime we know what we stand to gain from something, that makes us more interested, more committed to trying to achieve that thing, or doing that thing. So basically we want to show what are the incentives, what do we stand to gain by fasting, because that will motivate us to fast. Secondly, we wanted to talk about Fada'il Ramadan, the virtues, the specific virtues of fasting in the month of Ramadan. And the month itself, the blessings and the virtues and the merits that it contains. Again, because that will get us excited. We won't be able to wait for it to come, because this is the month which contains all these barakat, all these blessings and virtues and merits. The third thing I wanted to discuss was as-sibyanu was-siyam, children and fasting, getting our little ones involved and getting them in the habit of fasting. The fourth thing I wanted to cover was al-usra wa tilawat al-Quran. Basically reading the Quran as a family unit and establishing a program of reading, memorizing, and studying the Quran in Ramadan. And the fifth thing that I wanted to cover was sunan as-siyam, the best practices, the acts that increase the reward and enhance the quality of the fast. And last but not least, I wanted to touch on briefly Taraweeh and night prayers in Ramadan, especially under the conditions with these lockdown conditions and many of the masajid being closed. I wanted to talk about Taraweeh and Qiyam al-Layl, night prayers in the home. With that said, we'll start with our first topic, and that is the virtues, merits, spiritual and practical advantages of fasting. And the first one, so basically fasting itself as an act of ibadah, whether it's done in Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, is a very virtuous ritual, a very virtuous act of worship. And the more we know about the virtue of fasting, the more excited and motivated we will be to observe this act of worship inside of Ramadan and outside of Ramadan. So the first of the virtues of fasting is that it is an act of worship, a rite, a ritual that suppresses undesirable urges and enables self-restraint. It is something which teaches us to be able to control ourselves. Imagine a horse, a very wild horse, untamed horse with no bridle. How will its rider be able to what? To control it. He won't be able to control it. The horse will be taking him about, and he will have no say in which direction it goes, how fast it goes, how slow it goes, how high it jumps, etc. But if he has that bridle, he's able to what? To rein it in, to make it go left, to make it go right, and to make it go straight, to make it stop, to make it slow down, to make it speed up, etc. And so the same thing, we want to be able to bridle ourselves. We want to be in control of ourselves and not let ourselves be in control of us. And so one of the ways we can do this is by fasting. In the hadith, collected by Bukhari Muslim, on the authority of Abd'Llah ibn Mas'ud, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to a group of young people, a group of virile young people who they had all of the physical abilities to get married, but may or may not have lacked the financial ability to get married. So the Prophet, he addressed them and he said, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab, O audience of young men, man istata'a minkum al-ba'a falyatazawwaj. Whoever amongst you is able to get married, has the financial means to get married, then let him get married. فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ. Because the person who gets married finds it easier to lower his gaze, which is something which is required, and to guard his chastity, which is also required and necessary for a Muslim. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ. And whoever amongst you is unable to do that, فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ. Then let him fast. فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاء. Because it will be for him a wijah, something which suppresses his desires and helps him to gain self-restraint that will protect his chastity. So this is the quality of a sawm, that it teaches a person, trains a person to be in control and not to let himself or his base desires be in control of him. The second virtue and merit of fasting is that it is a shield from the hellfire. And this is the goal of the Muslim, or one of the goals of the Muslim, is to avoid punishment, eternal damnation in hell. And so we are actively seeking any means that will keep us from what? From going to that evil place that nobody wants to go. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling us in his hadith that one of the things that will keep you out of hell is fasting. As he said in the hadith collected by Tirmidhi on the authority of Abu Hurairah, he said, As-sawmu junnatun min an-nar. He said fasting is a shield from the hellfire. The one who fasts is unlikely to go to the hellfire. Another virtue of fasting. The third virtue of fasting is that fasting, not only will it protect you from the hellfire, it is a ticket to paradise. It is a ticket to paradise. The people who fast are almost guaranteed to go to paradise. And the proof for this is the hadith collected by Bukhari Muslim on the authority of Sahl ibn Sa'ad as-Sa'idi, in which the Prophet said, he said, Inna fil jannati baban yuqal lahu ar-rayyan. يدخل منه الصائمون يوم القيامة ولا يدخل منه أحد غيرهم يقال لهم أين الصائمون فيقومون فإذا دخلوا لم يدخل منه أحد أغلق ولم يدخل منه أحد. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in this hadith, he said, verily, there is a door in paradise. And the only people who will enter paradise through that door are the people who are in the habit of fasting. They will be called by their names. They will be called by their names from this door. Aina sa'imun. Where are those people? And you know who you are, who actively, habitually fasted. And they'll stand up because they know who they are. And they'll enter into this door. And once they have all entered, that door will be closed and locked shut, and no one will enter that door after them. If there's a special door in paradise for the people of fasting, it means fasting is a ticket to paradise. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who have that ticket on the day of judgment and enter through the bab of Ar-Rayyan. The fourth virtue and merit of fasting is that it is the best of religious deeds. It is the best of religious deeds. So you look around and you're trying to do the best, the most virtuous, the most pleasing to Allah. Start with fasting. Abu Umama al-Bahili radiallahu anhu, in the hadith like by Nasa'i, he asked the Prophet, he said, Ya Rasulullah, ayyul amri afdal? He said, O Messenger of Allah, which deed is the best deed? O Messenger of Allah, which deed is the best deed? And the Prophet he said, alayka bis-sawm, فَإِنَّهُ لَا عِدْلَ لَهُ. He said, take to fasting. Be in the habit of fasting, because there is no deed that it can equate to it. No deed comparable to it. No, it has no equivalent amongst the good deeds. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, from the virtues and merits of fasting is that the reward for fasting is immense. Its exact amount is only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is graded on a scale which is different from the scale upon which all the other deeds are graded. The proof for this is the hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah. And in that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, كُلُّ عَمَلِ ابْنِ آدَمْ يُضَاعَفُ الْحَسَنَةُ عَشْرَةُ أَمْثَالِهَا إِلَى 700 ضِعْف. He said, every deed that the son of Adam does is going to be multiplied. Each deed will at least be multiplied 10 times. And it will continue to be multiplied according to Allah's will and His pleasure, up to 700 times its real or original value or worth. Every deed is like this, has the potential of being rewarded 700 times more than its real value. Then Allah, He said, إِلَّا الصَّوْمَ فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. He said, except fasting, for it is for me, and I am going to give a special scale. And the exact reward I'm going to give for fasting is more than 700. How much more? Only Allah knows. And Allah is the one who's going to determine that. But fasting is special, brothers and sisters, in the sense that it is special in the sense that it is graded on a different scale, and it entitles a person to an immense reward which is greater than the 700 times value that other deeds qualify for. طيب, last but not least, from the virtues and merits is that fasting will intercede on behalf of the fasting person on the Day of Judgment. Think about that, brothers and sisters. Is that we're human beings and we make mistakes. And some of those mistakes are very serious, even if we tend to downplay them. And some of those mistakes entitle us, qualify us for punishment in the hereafter, even though we're Muslims and we're believers. We make mistakes, as the Prophet said, Kullu bani Adam khata. All the sons of Adam, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, they make mistakes, they commit sins, and they do it over and over again. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about people who sin, وَمَن يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ نَارًا. He says those who disobey Allah and they transgress His limits, Allah is going to punish them in the hellfire. That's a threat from Allah. Doesn't mean that He won't forgive them and pardon them. He has the power to forgive. But He's saying there's a possibility that those people will be punished for sinning. So here we are with our sins, and our day is coming. Our expiration date is going to come. We're going to meet Allah, and we're going to be judged. And we may have more sins than good deeds. And if that's the case, we're in big trouble. We are in big trouble, and we are much like a convicted felon who is now at the mercy of the jury or the judge for sentencing. The judge could say, I'll give you probation. I'm going to give you a second chance. Okay, straighten up yourself, straighten up, fly right, live your life right, etc. Maybe the judge will do that. And maybe the judge will give him a light sentence. Maybe the judge will throw the book at him. We don't know what's going to happen. But if you have a good defense attorney, that defense attorney can plead on your behalf for mercy and convince the judge or the jury to give you no sentence or give you a very light sentence. And the Prophet is saying that on the Day of Judgment, that defense attorney is going to be fasting. And fasting is going to be allowed by Allah to intercede and to get you off, to keep you from being punished. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, الصيام والقرآن يشفعان للعبد يوم القيامة. He said fasting and the Quran will come on the day of judgment and intercede. They'll be the defense attorney for the people who fast on the day of judgment. فَيَقُولُ الصَّوْمُ فَيَقُولُ الصِّيَامُ, and asif, fasting will say, أي رب منعته من الطعام والشهوات بالنهار فشفعني فيه. Fasting will say, oh my Lord, I prevented him from his food and from his desires during the daytime in Ramadan. So accept my shafa'ah, accept my intercession, accept my plea on his behalf. And the Quran will come. وَيَقُولُ الْقُرْآنُ أَيْ رَبْ مَنَعْتُهُ مِنَ النَّوْمِ بِاللَّيْلِ فَشَفِّعْنِي فِيهِ. Oh Allah, oh my Lord, I prevented him from sleeping at night. He stood up at night and prayed, reciting me during the night, and I prevented him from sleeping. So accept my shafa'ah. فَقَالَ sallallahu alayhi wa sallam فَيَشْفَعَانِ. Allah will accept their intercession and he will enter, inshallah ta'ala, paradise. So these are some of the virtues, 6 virtues that we mentioned of fasting. 6 things that should motivate us to be eager for this month to come so that we can obtain these virtues and merits from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the means of fasting. But from ba'dalik, we transition now to the virtues and merits of Ramadan. So now we talked about fasting in general, whether inside of Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, it has these virtues and merits. Now, specifically, when we fast in Ramadan, what are the special virtues of Ramadan itself as a month and fasting in Ramadan as a ritual? So first of all, Ramadan, one of the virtues of it that just stands out, just jumps out at you, is that it is the month of the Quran, is the month in which the Quran was revealed. Out of all the months, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to reveal the Quran in Ramadan. That means Ramadan is special. As Allah says in the Quran, شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنُ هُدًى لِلنَّاسِ. The month of Ramadan, the month in which the Quran was revealed as a guidance to mankind. That tells you Ramadan is special. Allah picked it out of all of the months. He picked it to be the month in which he initiated the revelation of his Quran. That from the virtues and merits of Ramadan is that in Ramadan something tremendous happens. And it's a tremendous help to us as Muslims and believers who are trying to be committed and do the right things. The doors of paradise are flung open, which means that the spirit of good, it flows freely. And hellfire, the doors of hellfire are locked shut. And the devils are chained, which means the spirit of evil is minimized and weakened. That we feel more inclined to do good and less inclined to do evil in Ramadan. Another virtue of Ramadan. As the Prophet said in the hadith, collected by Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah on authority of Abu Hurairah, and also Muslim has a version which is similar. Actually, we're going to mention the wording of Muslim. He said, إِذَا جَاءَ رَمَضَانَ فُتِّحَتْ أَبْوَابُ الْجَنَّةِ وَغُلِّقَتْ أَبْوَابُ النَّارِ وَسُفِّتَتْ الشَّيَاطِينَ. He said, when Ramadan comes, the doors of paradise are flung open on their hinges. And the doors of paradise, the doors of hellfire, all of them are locked shut. And the devils are chained up. And so this is important too for us to think about, because a lot of times during the year, when we do wrong, whether we do it externally or internally, we blame the devil. Man, shaitan got the best of me. Oh man, shaitan, curse shaitan. We're basically blaming shaitan for the wrong things that we're doing. In Ramadan, we can't blame shaitan. It's just us. And so we really know who we are in Ramadan. We really know where we need to work on ourselves in Ramadan, because we have no one else to blame but ourselves, because the devils are chained. But from the virtues of Ramadan is it contains the night of decree. The night of decree, which is better than 1,000 months. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Qadr, the 97th Surah, verse number 3, Laylatul Qadri khayrun min alfi shahr. He says the night of decree is better than 1,000 months. The scholars of Tafsir have explained that what that means is that the worship you do on Laylatul Qadr, if you did the same amount of worship for 1,000 months straight, those 1,000 months would not be equivalent in reward or greater in reward than the reward you would get for one night of worship on Laylatul Qadr. So it's a tremendous amount of blessing, a tremendous amount of reward that is there to be had on the night of decree. And that's a virtue that you only find when? In Ramadan. Last but not least, from the virtues of Ramadan, it is a month of forgiveness and a month of liberation from the hellfire. It is a month of forgiveness and a month of liberation from the hellfire. It is the month where necks will be free. We talked earlier, just a few moments ago, about how we're human beings. We make mistakes. And we make those mistakes, we run the threat or run the risk of being punished for those mistakes and warranting punishment in the hellfire for those mistakes. But every night in Ramadan, the thing about Ramadan, it's a month in which Allah is going to do what? He's going to pardon people. He's going to grant pardons. People who should go to the hellfire, he's going to say, I pardon that person. He's not going to go to hell. He's going to go to paradise. And we want to be from those people. And this is a virtue that you find, a virtue that we can attain only in the month of Ramadan. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, Man sama Ramadan, imanan wa ihtisaba, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbi. He said, whoever fasts the month of Ramadan out of faith and out of actively seeking the reward from Allah that is there to be had in the month of in fasting Ramadan, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbi, all of his previous sins will be forgiven. And he said in the other hadith by Tirmidhi and Ibn Majah, he said, وَلِلَّهِ أُتَقَاءُ مِنَ النَّارِ وَذَلِكَ فِي كُلِّ لَيْلَةٍ. Allah will free necks. He will liberate people from the hellfire every night in Ramadan. May Allah make us min utaqa'ihi fi Ramadan. May Allah make us from those who are liberated in this coming Ramadan. But the next thing that we wanted to talk about was children and fasting. Getting our little ones involved and getting them in the habit of fasting. This is very important for parents who have young children. So basically, as we know, young people under the age of puberty are not required to fast. And we talked about that previously, who's required to fast. And young people are not required to fast. If they are not pubescent or above, then they're not required to fast. But children who have reached the age of discernment, and the age of discernment is going to basically, it's something which is relative to the child. It's not a specific age, but generally children around 6, 7, or 8, they reach the age of what? The age of discernment. They reach the age where they can have a niyyah, where they can do something purposefully and willfully. Those children at that age, they are encouraged to fast. ويدل ذلك, this is evidenced by the hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim on the authority of Rubayya bint Mu'awwidh, in which she said, Kunna nusawwimu sibyanana. We used to make our children fast. Even though they weren't obligated to fast, we would make them fast. وَنَجْعَلْ لَهُمُ اللُّعْبَةَ مِنَ الْإِهْنِ. And we would make them little toys from wool, from material, from cloth. We would make them toys. فَإِذَا بَكَى أَحَدُهُمْ عَلَى الطَّعَامِ. So if one of them started crying because he wanted food, أَعْطَيْنَاهُ ذَلِكَ. We would give him that toy, and the toy would distract him. They would play with the toy and be distracted, okay? حَتَّى يَكُونَ عِنْدَ الْإِفْطَارِ. Until iftar, the time for breaking fast, would come, and then we would feed them. And also Bukhari, he brings a chapter in his Sahih, and he entitles it Babu Sawm Sibyan, the chapter of fasting for children. And he cites, under that chapter, he cites an athar, an incident where Umar al-Khattab, who used to go around during his khilafah, would go around and just check on people, check the streets, see what was going on. Nobody's fighting, nobody's cheating, nobody's stealing, nobody's in need of something that I should fulfill their need. So he would go around and do this, and he came across a man during the daytime of Ramadan who was inebriated. He was drunken in the street during the daylight hours of Ramadan, waliyadu billah. And so Umar, he saw this, he confronted the man, he scolded him. And he said to him, Waylak, wasibyan siyam. He said, what is the matter with you? You are a grown man and you're not fasting. Not only you're not fasting, you're doing haram during the daytime of Ramadan, and our children are fasting. Shows that it was from the practice of the early Muslims to encourage their young ones to what? To fast. And so we should be the same way. We should follow example, because they are the golden standard of how Islam is supposed to be practiced. So with that said, I want to encourage parents to what? To encourage your children to fast. Your young ones. You have 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and you feel like, this young man, this young lady is ready to do this. You encourage them. So how do you encourage them? How do you encourage them? First of all, the first level is try to have your young ones fast, fulfilling the conditions of the ritual fast. Have them fast, encourage them to fast just the way you fast. Get up for suhoor, have suhoor, and fast the entire day until dusk. You try that with them. If they can do it, alhamdulillah. If they can't do it, you go to the next level. If they ask to eat, first of all, if they ask to eat, so they're fasting like you're fasting, they get to about, 3 p.m. and there's still like 6 hours left. Well, 6 hours, that's a lot. There's maybe 4 hours left, 5 hours left. And they ask you to eat. Baba, Mama, I want to eat. Can I have something to eat? But they're asking you, they're asking you because they're just not in the habit. They're used to, basically they're habitual eaters. I usually have lunch at this time. I usually have a snack at this time. I have dinner at this time. And all that's thrown out of whack because of Ramadan. And you know that they're asking out of boredom, not because they're really hungry. So then you try to preoccupy them. Just like Rubayya bint Mu'awwidh, she said we used to preoccupy them with a toy. You give them something to do. Maybe you take them outside to the park to play ball. Maybe you let them ride their bike outside. Maybe you give them something to do that would distract them from what? From this this desire for food, which is brought on by boredom, not from real hunger. But third level, suppose they complain of hunger and they insist on eating. I'm hungry. They're clenching their stomach, okay? Maybe they're throwing a tantrum, okay? And they really, really want to eat, then allow them to break their fast. Allow them to break the fast, okay? And the time that they did spend fasting, you've achieved the ultimate objective of what you're trying to do, which is to train them. Okay, they're starting to fast. It's better than nothing. It wasn't a complete day, but they fasted 5 hours or 6 hours or how many ever hours, and then they broke their fast. But don't give up on them. Keep trying with them. And one strategy you can try is those children who struggle, is you start them with a specific number of hours. So let's say you said, for example, I'm going to have you fast for 8 hours, let's say, okay? The days nowadays, the days of fasting, usually what, about 16 hours or so? Maybe a little more, a little less, depending on what part of the country you're in. So you say, I'm going to have you start out with, 8 hours, okay? They get up for suhoor at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you have them fast until maybe like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, let's say. And then each day, you add an hour. Each day, they get a little bit more stronger, a little bit more willpower, a little more ability to do it, and you add an hour until what? Until they're fasting the whole day. That's one strategy. Another strategy is you can do day on, day off. So they're incentivized by what? By the fact that tomorrow they won't have to fast. And then that you're able to motivate them by saying, well, look, you had yesterday off, so you have to fast today, right? Etc. So that's another option that you have. And last but not least, I want to make the point. It's very important to remember that the purpose of what you're trying to do. The purpose is training and encouraging and not and disenchanting. You don't want to discourage them. You don't want to run them away from the faith. You don't want to make them have a negative opinion about the faith. So if you see that the child is being turned off and they're starting to look at the faith, whether they say it explicitly or their actions imply this, then back off. Because you're going to undermine and you're going to do what you're doing is going to be counterproductive. What you're trying to do is train them and encourage them and get them to love the deen and love to fast and be accustomed to find fasting easy. And if that's the opposite of that is happening, then what? Then back off. Then back off. Because again, remember the objective. The objective is not for them necessarily to fast, but the objective is for them to what? To get accustomed to fasting, to love fasting. And one of the things that will help, obviously, if they have older siblings who are already fasting, they'll want to do what everybody else in the household is doing. But maybe you don't have that. Maybe they're the oldest at 6, 7, or 8. And so in that case, again, you encourage them to the best of your ability. And if you see that they're moving in the right direction, they're excited about it, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing. And if you see that they are what? They are disenchanted, they're maybe upset, and they're developing a negative opinion about the religion, about the ritual itself, or the religion as a whole, back off. Back off. Take your foot off the gas. But with that said, we'll come now to the fourth issue in our list of issues that we wanted to cover. And that's reading Quran as a family and establishing a program of reading, memorizing, and studying the Quran in Ramadan. So this is very important. Why? Because as we said earlier, Ramadan is the month of the Quran. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس. The month of Ramadan, the month in which the Quran was revealed as a guidance to mankind. So this ayah, and also this ayah indicates clearly that the Quran is supposed to have a special place and supposed to be given a special level of attentiveness in the month of Ramadan. Add to that the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that every year in Ramadan he would review the Quran he would review the Quran with Jibreel. Every year, in the last year of his life, he reviewed it twice. Add to that the Salaf, the early Muslims. The early Muslims, they had a strong inayah. They had a very strong connection, concern. They were very attentive to the Quran in Ramadan. So all of this, when you put it all together, shows you that the Quran being front and center in Ramadan is a Muslim tradition. And it's a Muslim tradition which should not be forsaken by any Muslim. All the Muslims should give the Quran a special level of attention in Ramadan. And often we find that most people, especially men, they do this. We go to the masjid, and some men will come to the masjid early for before Maghrib, and they'll read Quran until iftar, right? Or after iftar, they'll come to the masjid and they'll stay in the masjid until Isha and Taraweeh, and they'll read Quran. Or whenever they have a free moment, they're picking up the Mus'haf. You see this inayah, but you know who gets left out a lot? Wives and children. Wives and children get left behind a lot in Ramadan if they are not themselves self-motivated, or their husbands and their parents are not motivating them and encouraging them and facilitating for them this inayah, this attentiveness to the Quran. So for example, a lot of times wives are busy cooking. Husbands are telling the wife, I want this and I want this, you got to make this, and asking for these elaborate meals, and the result is the wife is so busy in the kitchen, there's no time. If she wants to read the Quran, there's no time to read the Quran. And unfortunately, for children, Ramadan just becomes same old, same old. They do the same thing in Ramadan they do outside of Ramadan, except what? They don't eat. So they're in the room all day, playing on the game, right? Talking on the phone, sleeping, right? They're doing these other things, and they're not being attentive to the Quran, and we're missing out on an opportunity. So this year, brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you to make it a point to get everyone involved. Not just you, but everyone. Your wife, your children, everyone in the household. Make it really and truly the month of the Quran in your house, in practice, not just in theory. So you want to come out of Ramadan and everybody looks back, your wife, your children, and you yourself, and say, man, I've never been that attentive to the Quran in my life. That month was really a month of the Quran. The things I did with the Quran and with my family around the Quran, centered around the Quran, I can never say I've done that. Unprecedented. You really want to make it the month of Quran. You want to be able to look back and say, yes, I did that. I can honestly say, confidently say, I made Ramadan the month of Quran in my household. And what are some of the approaches? What are some of the things you can do? One is reading the Quran, making a point, everybody in the house, reading the Quran daily to complete one full reading before the end of the month. Everybody in the house sets aside time, and maybe you might even have to make a schedule. A lot of times if we say we're going to do something, but we don't have anything that people are committed to, we don't have a contract ourselves, we'll say we're going to do it, maybe we start out doing it, and then ultimately we stop doing it, okay? We kind of regress, and we kind of give up, and no. So you might have to make a schedule, but there's a time set aside every day for each person to read one part of the Quran, completing the month of Ramadan, 30 parts of the Quran, a part each day, etc. So that's one way that that's one approach that you can do. Another approach is you can establish a memorization program for the month. So for example, you might identify a part of the Quran, a surah, a group of surahs, and you divide those surahs, or that part, or that particular chapter, you 30 days. Let's say, for example, there's a chapter that is, there's no such thing, but I'm just going to give this example. 300 ayat. We don't have that in the Quran, but we have pretty close to the Baqarah is 286. So let's say, for example, take Baqarah 286. You divide that into 30 days. Okay, how many ayahs? 286 divided by 30, how many ayahs would that be? And so I'm going to read that number of ayat and try to memorize that number of ayat each day. So when I finish Ramadan, I finish Surah Al-Baqarah. Subhanallah. Person might say, I'm going to take Juz Amma. I'm going to read Juz Amma, divide it into what? 1 page a day? 30 pages? I'm sorry, not 1 page a day because it's 20 pages. So maybe less than a page or a little more than a page, however a person decides to do it. And they divide it into that number, and when they come out of Ramadan, they've memorized Juz Amma or Juz Tabarak or another Juz of the Quran. So these are different ways, different approaches we can do it to memorize in the month of Ramadan. Another approach would be to establish a Quran halaq. And I really, really encourage everyone who has children in the household, and even if you're just a couple, husband and wife, establish a Quran halaq in the home. Don't leave people to their own auspices, their own commitment. Don't tell people, look, you better read Quran. Don't do that. But you have to set aside a time where everybody has to stop what they're doing, come to the circle. There's a designated place, there's a designated time. Just like a person has a job that they have to go to, stop what you're doing and be in this place at this time, and we're going to read Quran together. And when you read as a family, so for example, let's say, for example, the father is skilled in the recitation of Quran, knows the rules, has memorized some Quran, etc. Then you sit and you read the surah that you're going to focus on, let's say. You read it and let your wife read it. Let your children read it. And you correct their recitation and teach them the rules of tajweed. Practice practically teach them. Don't just tell them, this is this, this is that. No, you're in practice. Say it like this. No, it should be like that, etc. And also, after you've done that and you've corrected their recitation, then let's look at the meaning of it. Let's look at the meaning of it. What does it mean? What are some of the lessons we can take away from that and do that every day in Ramadan? Wallahi, the family's going to benefit from that. And one last way, and one thing I want to mention related to this is that there's no harm whatsoever in reading it. If Arabic is not your language, reading in your native language. Read, if you're an English speaker, take the English Quran and read it from cover to cover. The most important thing is that you can't read as the qaida says, "Ma la yudrak kulluhu la yudrak kullu." If you can't do the best thing, the whole thing, you do the next best thing. So if you can't read the Quran entirely in Arabic, struggle, it's difficult, then read the English version. But read the whole thing if you can, or read a part of it, focus on it, study it, and come out of the month being able to look back and say, you know what, I really did make that the month of the Quran. From the points that we want to make, we want to talk about Sunnah Siyam. Ala Ujala, quickly, we want to mention some of the best practices and the acts that increase the reward and enhance the quality of our fast. Something that will make our fast even more blessed and rewardable and entitled to reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the sunan, one of the important practices that we should do is delaying the suhoor. That it's a common practice for some people that they will make suhoor at midnight. And then they'll sleep through Fajr. Or some people will get up just in time for Fajr before Fajr goes out. And obviously they have a wisdom behind that. Maybe they want to get more rest, etc. They don't want to wake up and they don't want to basically have a period of waking up, which basically disturbs, or in the middle of their sleep. They want their sleep to be continuous and not to have incontinuity. Whatever their wisdom is. But we have to know that the sunnah is to make the suhoor close to Fajr, to delay the suhoor and to make it as close to Fajr as possible. We do lidhalik. The hadith collected by Bukhari and Muslim on the authority of Zayd ibn Thabit, who was asked by Anas, Kam kana bayn al-adhani wa suhoor, that Zayd, he says, we used to make suhoor with the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet would make his breakfast, or his pre-dawn meal, and we would do it with him. We would sit with him and we would eat with him. And so Anas, he asked, he said, how much time was there between the adhan and the suhoor? So the Prophet would make suhoor close to the adhan time. How much time do you think was between one and the other? And Zayd, he answered, he said, qadra khamsina ayah. He said the amount of time is like 50 verses of the Quran. Now, if you look at, for example, the Quran, you have Surah Al-Mursalat, which is the 77th surah. It's exactly 50 ayat. Look at that surah. How long do you think it would take to recite? It probably would take maybe 4 minutes. 4 or 5 minutes. That shows you the Prophet ﷺ was making his suhoor close to the time of Fajr. Close to the time of Fajr. And he was not making it very early in the night, but rather late in the night, as close as possible. And Ibn Hajar, he mentions one of the benefits of them. There are many benefits, but one benefit, obviously, the closer you eat to Fajr, the more energy and the more residual energy you will have throughout the day. The earlier you eat, your body is burning that immediately. And so by the time you get maybe to midday, you run out of gas. Okay, so that's one of the obvious wisdoms of delaying the suhoor in terms of the practical wisdoms. As far as the spiritual wisdom, or I should say, is that you are following the sunnah of the Prophet. From the sunan, is hastening al-iftar, that you hasten to break the fast. Just like the opposite of the suhoor, you delay the suhoor, but when you come to the end of the fast, you hasten to break the fast. As soon as you are certain that dusk has come, that nightfall has come, or sunset has come, I should say, then you what? Then you break your fast. We do lidalik, the hadith of Bukhari Muslim, on the authority of Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'di, in which the Prophet said, "La yazalu nasu bi khair ma ajjalu al-fitr," that the people will not cease to be upon good as long as they continue to hasten in breaking their fast. Hasten in breaking their fast. So there's no virtue, as some people might perceive, there is no virtue in prolonging the fast. So first, some people will actually do this, is that they will not break their fast until Isha. And they think that there's virtue in what? Adding that extra hour. No, there's no virtue in that. The virtue, as the Prophet has explained, the people will remain upon goodness as long as they hasten in breaking the fast. But the third sunnah is that when you break your fast, you should break your fast upon what? Upon dates. An odd number of dates if you can. Okay? And the proof for this is the hadith collected by Al-Bukhari Muslim. I'm sorry, the hadith collected by Al-Khamsa. The five, which is Ahmad, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and Nasai ibn Majah, on the authority of Salman ibn Amr al-Dabbi. Salman ibn Amr al-Dabbi, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا أَفْطَرَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيُفْطِرْ عَلَى تَمْرٍ فَإِنَّهُ بَرَكَةٌ. He said, whoever amongst you is able to do this, then let him break his fast upon dates, because that is a blessing. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَلْيُفْطِرْ عَلَى مَاءٍ فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ طَهُورٌ. He said that in whoever does not find dates, then let him break his fast with water, because it is a purification for him. So if we find dates, break your fast with dates. If you don't find that, break your fast with water, because it is a purification. But also from the sunan of fasting is that you make supplications throughout the day. While you're fasting, busy yourself with dua. And when you break your fast with dua, praying to Allah for whatever it is you want or need from Him. Filling your day with a dua, and this is evidenced by those hadith. There are a few of them, and collectively they are authentic, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, there are three who their supplication is not rejected, is not turned back. And one of them, he said, as-sa'im hina yuftir, the fasting person when he breaks his fast, which is sunniyah, the practice, and that it is from the sunnah to make dua when you break your fast. The other version of the hadith says, as-sa'im hatta yuftir, the fasting person until he breaks his fast, which shows it's from the sunnah to continuously make dua while you're fasting, and your dua while you're fasting is more likely to be accepted. And then fifthly, I should say, from the sunan of fasting, is that we increase in the observance of good deeds. We do more and more good deeds of every variety while we're fasting. And this is evidenced by the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, his own practice, that he would intensify his good deeds and his worship and his charity during Ramadan. And also it's evidenced by the statement of Jabir, who said, فَلَا يَكُونْ يَوْمُ صَوْمِكَ وَيَوْمُ فِطْرِكَ سَوَاء. Do not let your days of fasting and your days of non-fasting be the same. There should be a difference, a marked difference in your character, your conduct, the way you carry yourself, and also the way you worship Allah. Your worship should increase in intensity during Ramadan and while you're fasting. And then last but not least, from the sunnah of fasting is that suppose, and it can happen, that while you're fasting, someone, they insult you. Someone, they mistreat you. Someone, they try to get in an argument with you, a fight with you, or something like that. That could happen. And when that happens, what should you do? How should you conduct yourself? Especially since usually fasting shortens our fuses. So the Prophet ﷺ gave specific guidance for people who find themselves in this situation while they're fasting. And that is one of the sunan, one of the best practices for the one who is fasting. As we find the hadith of Bukhari Muslim, on the Abu Hurairah, in which he said, فإن شاتمه أحد يوم صومه أو قاتله فليقل إني امرؤ صائم. He said, if he is fasting, and while he is fasting, someone insults him or tries to pick a fight with him, then let him say, I am fasting. Let him say to the person, I am not going to retaliate, not because I'm too weak to retaliate, not because but because I fear Allah, I am fasting, and I am not going to ruin my fast by responding to you. And then last but not least, from the points that we wanted to make, ya ikhwan, before we close out, is we wanted to talk about Taraweeh and night prayers. Obviously, ya ikhwan, when we think about Ramadan, one of the things that goes hand in hand with Ramadan, and one of the things that many of us find a great deal of ladha, a great deal of enjoyment, a great deal of peace, one of the most attractive things to most people in Ramadan, they look forward to Ramadan because of this, is Taraweeh prayers in the masjid. Going to the masjid, seeing the masjid full at a time and on a day other than Jumu'ah, and hearing that Quran recited beautifully by the Imam, praying next to all these people, hearing their thunderous voices as they say Ameen after the Imam recites Al-Fatiha, responding and listening to the dua of qunut that the Imam gives at the end of the Taraweeh prayer each night, and hoping that those dua will be answered and that we'll be engulfed in the mercy of Allah and receive the benefits of that dua, etc. We look forward to that. And unfortunately, because of the circumstances and COVID-19, many of us are going to be deprived of that. We're not going to have that. And we find it easier to offer this prayer every night when we go to the masjid, because when you have other people doing something, it makes it easier for you to do it. It motivates you to do it. And we're not going to have that. And so again, we're going to see what we really are made of this Ramadan. Those of us who can't go to the masjid, we're going to see what we really are made of. And so it's critical and key for us to understand that just because Taraweeh in the masjid has stopped or is not going to be held, Taraweeh should not be stopped. It should not be suspended. It should not be abandoned. I really understand that the real sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is to pray Taraweeh, to pray the night prayer in the home. If anybody knows anything about the history of Taraweeh, you know that the Prophet ﷺ one time during one Ramadan, his companions were gathered in the masjid. Some of them, a small number of them. And the Prophet came out and he stood up and he started praying. And he, as the Prophet did, he recited beautifully. And the companions who were in the masjid, they stood up, a handful of them, they stood up and they prayed behind him. And it was an amazing prayer. It was a tremendous spiritual experience. So the Prophet, after he finished the prayer, went to his home. And the next day, the people, they went out in the town. And they started telling the people, man, we had this tremendous spiritual experience. We were in the masjid, the Prophet came out. It was just amazing. And so when they talked to those people and told those people about what happened, those same people lingered in the masjid the next night after Salat al-Isha to see if the Prophet would do it again. And sure enough, he came out and he did it again. And so now you have a larger group of people praying with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And again, the Prophet had never done this before. So he led them again. And those people now, it's a larger group who now have experienced this amazing spiritual experience with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this amazing prayer that he offered. And so they went out into the town the next day and started telling people about it. So that next night, now we're talking about the third night now, there is this tremendous gathering of people. There's all this tajij and noise. You know how it is when a bunch of people in the masjid and they're talking or reading or whatever. There's a lot of people in the masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ, he opened his door and he peeked out. And he saw all those people. And he closed his door and he didn't come out. Those people waited and waited and waited and the Prophet didn't come out. So ultimately, he came out the next morning and he told the people. He said, I saw you. I don't want you to think I didn't see you gathered in the masjid last night. I did see you. But I feared that if I came out and we continued offering this prayer every night, it would become obligatory. And I didn't want it to become obligatory because you wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to maintain it. So the Prophet prayed, led his companions in Taraweeh prayer during his lifetime twice. Other than that, the Prophet prayed the night prayer every night in his home, without exception. And his companions did the same thing. And after he passed away, the companions continued to do what? To offer prayer in their homes, some of them in the masjid. And when they offered in the masjid, they never offered it what? Collectively at first. There will be a small group here, one individual there, another small group over there. They will be praying what? These prayers simultaneously, some of them in the masjid in small groups or as individuals, and some of them in their homes. And it was only when Umar came that he reestablished the sunnah of Taraweeh that the Prophet had practiced for 2 nights in his lifetime. That said, Taraweeh and the masjid are not part and parcel. They don't go hand in hand. It's not like if you don't have one, you can't have the other. We should have the other. And we have to understand that we're going to see what we're really made of. We have to force ourselves and force our families as a family unit together. We push each other. We're going to pray. We're going to make Isha on time. After Isha, we're going to pray. And we're going to pray mastata'na. We're going to pray what we can. It doesn't have to be 11 rak'ah, 11 units. It doesn't have to be 13 units. It can be whatever you're able to do, but we are going to pray the night prayer every night in Ramadan. And if we do that, brothers and sisters, the Prophet ﷺ promised us tremendous reward that none of us can do without. As he said in the hadith collected by Bukhari Muslim, on the authority of Abu Hurairah, he said, Man qama Ramadan, imanan wa ihtisaba, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbi. Whoever prayed the night prayer for the whole month of Ramadan, and he did that out of faith, believing in Allah, and actively seeking the reward from Allah, all of his previous sins will be forgiven. This is the reward we stand to gain, brothers and sisters, if we can push ourselves to practice this Taraweeh, make this night prayer every night in Ramadan, even if we're forced to do it every night in our homes. And with that, we will bring the session to a close. This will be the last session before the month of Ramadan. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as our early predecessors used to ask Allah and make dua to Allah, and yuballighna Ramadan, that He causes us to reach the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those who reach the month of Ramadan, who fast the month of Ramadan out of faith and seeking His reward, and who receive His forgiveness and His liberation from hellfire in this month. May Allah bless your houses. May Allah bless your spouses. May Allah bless the rest of your days and your evening. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your fasting in the month of Ramadan. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who listen to the talk and follow the best of it. Hada wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.